What's up, you guys? It's Warren with Scale Audio, and today we're going to talk about reverb. Each type of reverb has its own characteristics that makes it a prime choice for specific uses. You will learn many types of reverbs in this video, which will give you a better idea of when you might want to use them. Please smash the like button and subscribe. First things first, we'll talk about what I'm going to call acoustical reverbs. These reverbs are real spaces and emulations that are great for placing an instrument or a sound inside of a space in your mix. Imagine placing a speaker at one end of a room, a microphone at the other, picking up the room noise as you play your source sound through the room and recording it back into your workstation. You see, this is how it was done before we got emulations of it. And that's exactly what these emulations replicate. The room in question can be any shape or size with any kind of absorptive or reflective material within that room, creating different textures and sounds. The first of these we'll talk about is the room. A room emulation is generally a very simple four-wall shape, nice and parallel, but because of this, you get frequency buildups and other anomalies. These rooms are generally heavier in the early reflections and lighter in the tails. Most likely, you're sitting in a room right now. And if you look around this room, ask yourself if it's built to sound good. It probably isn't, but that doesn't mean that it won't sound good. Room reverbs work well on most instruments, adding coloration and warmth. I have a guitar loaded up from Points Back to You by Jed Chapman. And for an example, I'm going to add a room reverb to the guitar. All right, so I've loaded an instance of Reverb with a room preset. And if we listen to it, you should feel some warmth and a little bit of boxiness. I'll start with it dry. And then with the reverb. And that is the sound of a room reverb. Next thing we'll talk about is chambers. Chambers are generally smaller spaces like rooms, but they're created to be very reflective and sound large. Chambers will emphasize the tail and soften the early reflections, which is the complete opposite of the effect of a room, more clear and more transparent. So what if we loaded a chamber on the guitar instead of a room? So here I've loaded a bright chamber from Waves Reverb, and let's listen to how that sounds on the guitar. We'll do no reverb and then add the reverb. No reverb. Let's add the reverb. And then for reference, let's compare it to the hall reverb that we had before. We'll do the hall reverb, and then we'll switch it to the chamber. Okay, chamber reverb. Okay, chamber. Next thing we have is a hall, not as in a hallway, but as in a concert hall. Concert halls are large treated spaces that are made specifically for sounding good. This means an overall even or pleasing balance and tone, and a lush color and feeling. These concert halls have long swelling tails that are fit for specific uses. The thickness and the long decay of a concert hall, however, can muddy up a mix very quickly. But in something like a piano solo, the hall is a perfect option. And although they're anything but minimal, a hall can be perfect for orchestras or operas. I mean, in all reality, that's what they were built for. So let's hop in and make another comparison on our trusty guitar. So if we listen to our guitar with a hall, before and after, after, and as you can tell, we have instant warmth, but also instant muddiness. If I change this preset to a bright hall, which is going to give us more brightness and less muddiness, more higher reflections, less lower reflections, and we listen to it, you'll still see how this can get muddy. We'll do no reverb. And with the new bright reverb. A lot clearer. But what if we compare this to our bright chamber? We'll play our bright chamber now. Now we'll play the bright hall. As you can see, the chamber feels a lot more open and a lot more clear, whereas the hall is a lot muddier and a lot warmer. Listening to that reverb, you might be able to picture how that could be great for something like a piano solo. Now, besides these, you'll see many other iterations of different rooms and spaces. And on that topic, you'll often see something called a convolution reverb. A convolution reverb uses something called an impulse response to measure a space and recreate the reverb of that space. Much like we made different size rooms with different types of reflections, warm, bright, etc. If you really did set up that speaker and that microphone in a room and you played a quick snap or a sound like that and recorded it, you would then be able to load that into a convolution reverb, which would treat that snap kind of like a bat's sonar echo. How they use sound to actually be able to see. Convolution uses sound to be able to measure and see the space of a room, and then recreates that room. And you can find tons of these impulse responses online, recreating different real spaces around the world, which is pretty cool. But now that we've gone over the acoustical options, let's go over the mechanical options. There is 2 mechanical reverbs specifically that you've probably heard of. First things first is the plate reverb. Plate reverbs work by taking a sheet of metal with a transducer in the center, and this transducer actually sends waves and sends signal through this plate. These ripples or these waves work their way to the edges of the plates, bounce back, and somewhere in there on either side is generally going to be pickups. These pickups are just like the pickups on your guitar, which will take these ripples or these waves, record it, amplify it, and send it back to you as the plate reverb. So much like acoustic reverbs, you can think of a plate reverb the same. The transducer is the speaker. The pickups are microphones. Now, because these plates are smaller than a room, you're going to get quicker and stronger early reflections. And this thin metal plate that's used is actually more sensitive to higher frequencies. Taking that into account, our plates are generally going to sound brighter. You could maybe even say shiny. But these high frequencies are going to dissipate quickly, whereas the low frequencies are going to take a longer time to build up and swell, which will often give a darker tail or a darker end to this bright reverb. Now, due to the sound waves only having a 2-dimensional space to travel versus a 3-dimensional space like a room does, the tails are actually going to be a lot denser and a lot smoother. Something cool about the plate reverb is these plate reverbs often play well with others. So let's take a look. Now that we have a plate loaded, we'll listen to the dry versus wet. First dry. Now wet. And in comparison to our Hall, you'll notice a huge difference. Hall first. Plate. And now we're cooking with gas. The second mechanical reverb that you've probably heard of, but you might not have, is a spring reverb. Spring reverbs are much the same as a plate reverb in the way that they transmit and pick up sound. However, besides that, they're a lot different. With the plate reverb, we had a transducer and pickups attached to a sheet of metal. However, with the spring reverb, we have transducers and pickups hooked up to, you guessed it, a spring. Now, both plates and springs are bright and both blend well with other reverbs, but that's about where the similarities end. These spring reverbs have a thin sound and sound like, well, a spring. There's a certain boing to them that changes the playing field. It is not as popular of a choice as a plate reverb or as widely used. The most common and one of the greatest uses of a spring reverb is on a guitar. So if you can guess what we're going to do next, we're going to take a listen. Okay, we've got an Arturia spring reverb loaded, and we're going to take a listen to with and without. We'll start without. And then with. Okay. And in comparison with our plate, and there you have it. Now, we're going to start talking about digital reverbs. And digital reverbs can encompass just about anything. Before, when I said acoustical reverbs, if you weren't speaking of a digital reverb, that would mean using the actual rooms. Whereas digital reverbs or algorithmic reverbs are emulations to recreate these rooms. However, these digital reverbs can be pushed way farther than reality. You can have longer tails and insane reflections that you wouldn't generally get out of a natural acoustical situation. So with that said, let's talk about some unnatural reverbs. We'll start off talking about a great tool called the gated reverb. Gated reverbs are very strong and powerful reverbs that shut off very, very quickly. It's like gating audio. These gated reverbs are great for snares and other percussive instruments. It can be the good way to extend the tail of percussive instruments and place them in a room without muddying up and taking over a mix. In order to show this effect, I'm going to run a gated reverb all the way wet so you can hear exactly what the reverb is actually doing. You can hear it gets kind of choppy because it's trying to shut off or it's performing a gating effect on our reverb. There's also on top of that many forms of what's called nonlinear reverbs. Most reverbs, their decays are linear, or it means consistent and constant with the decay of the tail. While this doesn't happen in an actual straight line, it's still considered linear. A gate is actually a nonlinear reverb because you no longer have a linear tail exiting out. Now, with tails that are nonlinear, another cool effect we have is a reverse reverb. Reverse reverbs are a great way to do a live reverse sound leading up to an audio signal that is about to take place but hasn't taken place yet. You'll often hear these as a sort of swell before a sound happens. These are generally done manually by reversing a sound, running a reverb over it with a long tail, recording that, and then reversing it again so that the original source signal, which is already reversed, is now straightforward, and you have a tail coming up to the very beginning sound. Blends well, sounds great. A reverse reverb will somewhat do the same thing for us. Now, if we take a listen to this reverse reverb, you'll notice a swell right before the actual instrument starts. If I go more dry and less wet, see that lead up? Reverse reverb. While there's other reverb effects like the echo verb, which combines delays and reverb, or the reso verb, amongst others, you should now have a good amount of context to be able to know how to choose the right reverb for the right situation. And if you still feel a bit confused, that's okay. We're going to summarize. With acoustic reverbs, you can use the shape and consistency of any room to add beautiful reverbs to your source files. Mechanical reverbs, like a plate or a spring, aren't as realistic, but sound beautiful and have a place in their own right. They also know how to play well with others, which is a great added bonus. Our digital reverbs, or the digital reverb algorithms, can recreate any of the pre-mentioned acoustical or mechanical spaces. Along with this fact, they can push the edges of reality, giving us some really cool tools like gated reverbs, reverse reverbs, and more. So with that said, go try out these different reverbs and see what you come up with. And with all these, we have a toolbox of reverbs for any occasion. So if you like this video, please like this video. If you have any comments, please comment. I always appreciate a subscribe. It's Warren with Scale Audio, and adios.